2021 a slow year for video games. The challenges of developing during the COVID-19 pandemic delayed numerous games and clearly impacted the quality of others. A quick look at the sheer number of underrated games that managed to sneak under the radar this year reveals how deep the modern gaming industry really is. There are dozens of such games that deserve a bigger share of the spotlight than they ultimately got, but these are the most noteworthy titles that I feel went overlooked last year. Why Bonfire Peaks is so brilliant. It's certainly challenging, but there's a joy to just existing in this game's world and slowly discovering its secrets that helps ensure that you're rarely so frustrated that you're not willing to beat your head against the wall one more time to find that solution that has eluded you so far. Ascent is a Metroidvania game with roguelike elements and a character swapping mechanic that offers a surprising amount of gameplay variety. Don't be thrown off by the retro graphics. Ascent is a brilliant evolution of the Metroidvania concept that will appeal to hardcore genre fans and dedicated newcomers alike. The No More Heroes series has always been easy to recommend to fans of fundamentally weird games, and No More Heroes 3 certainly carries on that particular tradition. It's a magnificently strange game. In a way, though, I'd also argue that some of No More Heroes 3's gameplay refinements make it the most accessible entry in this franchise. No More Heroes 3 doesn't quite land all of its new ideas, but this is truly one of the most fascinating and unique creative visions of the year. It's easy to look at Cyber Shadow and see yet another indie tribute to old-school, 8-bit action games like Castlevania and Ninja Gaiden. Truth be told, that's pretty much what it is. However, Cyber Shadow manages to nail the feel of those games in a way that so many other 8-bit tributes simply fail to do. This is a devious and clever little game that somehow taps into the purity of this genre while offering an experience that feels fascinatingly modern in the best ways. Mundawn is a pure horror game that forces you to use your wits to overcome some impressive challenges. While it sometimes reminds me of some of the great point-and-click adventure games of the late 90s and early 2000s, this title manages to remain very much its own thing even as elements of it invoke certain classic experiences. While New Pokémon Snap ended up being one of the year's most surprisingly good games, Tome is undoubtedly 2021's best game about photography and possibly the best example of that strange subgenre ever made. This puzzle game's hand-drawn graphics will certainly lure you in, but it's Tome's photo-based brain teasers and wonderful cast of characters that make this one of the most uplifting and surprisingly deep games of the last year. Given how often I hear people cry out for classic survival horror experiences, I'm shocked that Tormented Souls generated almost no real buzz last year despite being the most glowing love letter to Resident Evil, Alone in the Dark, and Silent Hill that you will ever have the privilege of playing. The Medium is one of those modern horror games that is arguably a little too ambitious for its own good and will likely be remembered as much for its flaws, like its uneven story and diminishing central premise, as its greatness. This psychedelic reimagining of classic survival horror games is beautiful, surprising, and often genuinely scary. The Ascent manages to translate the basic Diablo ARPG formula into a more than solid isometric shooter experience that is amplified by a surprisingly compelling universe and storyline. I had hoped that the Ascent's Day 1 availability on Xbox Game Pass would help this ARPG reach a slightly larger audience, but it feels like this one is just destined to become a bit of a cult classic. The Artful escape deserves more love than it has gotten so far on the basis of its cast alone. Where else can you find Lena Headey, Jason Schwartzman, Mark Strong, and Carl Weathers working together? While The Artful escape's apparent disinterest in its own gameplay will almost certainly alienate many potential fans, the quality of this title's visuals, story, music, and characters is impossible to deny. As a sports RPG about dodgeball, I have to admit that it feels like Dodgeball Academia may have been made to appeal to fascinations that even I didn't know I seemingly had until I played this game. While Dodgeball Academia isn't as tight of a sports RPG experience as Golf Story, there is an undeniable charm to this game that makes it easy to overlook its rough gameplay edges. Anyone vaguely interested in the sports RPG genre will almost certainly fall in love with this game. Steel Assault is a relentless 16-bit action title that features incredible set pieces, an amazing soundtrack, and a surprising number of little innovations that really turn this otherwise retro experience into something that is so much more than a nod to a different time. Steel Assault deserves a lot of credit for feeling like a tribute to an era of retro action game rather than a license-free recreation of a specific experience. As a game about a lone camper exploring a haunted island, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Cozy Grove is some kind of slightly ironic horror game. However, this strange blend of Don't Starve, Animal Crossing, and Stardew Valley is actually one of the most charming games of the last year. While Cozy Grove doesn't quite reach the heights of some of the titles it was clearly inspired by, this real-time experience is surprisingly relaxing and undeniably lovely. It's also designed to be played for months. Anyone who loves truly difficult puzzle experiences that require you to think well outside of the box owes it to themselves to give this game a chance. It's always been amazing that an idea this weird became a franchise in the first place, and Soulstorm will remind you why gaming is better with the Oddworld series in it.